Bengals. We'll start with this. Skinny Stripe Hype had a column titled 3 players who could be in their final season with the Bengals. The 3 players they listed were T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, and Trent Brown. So rank each of those 3 guys 1 to 10 on their likelihood of being with the Bengals past this season. Obviously, Hendrickson has another year on his contract, but the thought was since he asked for a trade this year that maybe they would look to trade him to get some value out of him before he walks.
Well, Trent Brown definitely is not going to be on this roster. He would be the definitive not a chance in Hades that he'll be on this roster after this year. The only way it would be is if Amarius Mims plays and suffers some catastrophic injury and he won't ever play again, and Trent Brown, you still try to negotiate with him at that point, but he'd be the least. T, I almost would put it at a scale. It's 10 being the highest that they won't be here.
Yeah, 10 will be they're definitely gone no matter what.
9.9 on T. I just don't see a scenario. You could see a scenario. I just don't see it taking place that he's back with this team. And then Trey, I honestly, before he got the contract extension last year, I honestly thought the Bengals were going to let him walk after this past season. The way his contract was structured, you wouldn't have taken a ton of a dead cap hit. You owed him a big chunk in base salary that you could have got out from under. I thought that's really why they drafted Myles Murphy in the first place. But they went ahead and extended Trey before that took place, and obviously wanted to get an extra year out of him. I would put him probably right at the five mark, the midway, 50-50 either way. I think some of it will depend on how does Myles Murphy play this season in that rotational role. Where does things stand with Jamar Chase's contract? What other holes maybe they think they have to fill, and getting out from underneath that it'll be a dead cap hit, but again, it'll be less of one because of the base salary that he's also due to make in 2025. So he'd be the only one of those 3 that I think has a shot to come back. And again, I may even put it at 60-40 that he's back with this team next year.
All right. Well, we are in the middle of Mount Rushmore season. We've talked about that. We've been doing it for a few weeks now.
Yes, we are.
We'll continue right down that path here. ESPN had a write-up with a bunch of different little categories, but one of them was non-starter to know. And they went with receiver Trenton Irwin. They wrote, it's hard to tell who's going to be the 3rd receiver behind Chase and Higgins, but Irwin actually scored higher than Higgins in ESPN's receiver tracking metrics last season and had a receiving DVOA of 20.8%, which ranked 10th among receivers with 10 to 49 pass targets. Skinny, if you were writing the capsule for that headline, Bengals non-starter to know, who would you have gone with?
He's in that group. I got to be honest with you. Man, that's a tough one because I'm trying to think of positions. I can't come up with one, to be honest with you. You have one that I can play off of? Because
would Myles Murphy be considered a non-starter?
He is a non-starter, yeah. Because he's a rotational.
Would that potentially be in play there? I know we were talking. Paul Dehner thinks he's going to get 10 sacks potentially.
I know, and I didn't disagree with that. I think he'll be a rotational pass rush piece of actually a sub pass rush piece. I think what you'll see Myles Murphy and Trey Hendrickson as the ends, and then playing games with Sam Hubbard in different roles across that defensive line on 3rd downs.
This may be cheating too, but Chase Brown potentially, if he's
a
backup running back. I mean,
yeah. I guess the key question is who technically gets the first carry of each game, and that becomes the starter. So is there a package where he's in there because that's his package and he gets the first carry of the game, and hence he's listed as a starter, right?
It feels like cheating to use him because it does feel like he's likely going to get a share of the carries automatically. It's not like he's a true backup necessarily.
Yeah. Can I go back to the ESPN metrics? And you know me, I think analytics certainly has its place. And Trent Irwin never is going to pass the eyeball test for whatever stereotypical reason you want to do. T. Higgins always does. And this is going to sound extremely critical, and I don't mean it to be. Listen, that's where I go back to this whole, everybody's losing their mind about not paying T. And I'm sorry, he makes spectacular plays. That catch in Minnesota is still against Minnesota is going to go down as one of the greatest plays I've ever watched in person. To not only jump up and catch it, but then whip it around the pylon for a touchdown. He does spectacular things, but again, for the most part, he's a okay receiver. I think he's a top 25-ish, but not in that upper echelon that he deserves to get paid that kind of money that he's asking for. Somebody's going to pay it, bully for them, but I know that's going to be an unpopular decision because T does spectacular things. But when you look at some of his numbers and the injury issues, I just go, Okay, get one more year out of him and call it a day. I don't know why everybody's losing their minds about. You're not losing a future Hall of Famer here. You're losing a starting caliber wide receiver. I think Trent Irwin in the right circumstance can be a major weapon.
I really like T. Higgins. I also feel like there's a high probability whoever pays T. Higgins his next contract is going to
regret it. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Continuing with this theme here, CBS's Pete Prisco did his top 100 NFL player rankings. He had 3 Bengals in his top 33. Jamar Chase was number 13. Joe Burrow was 15th. And Trey Hendrickson was 33rd. I got a few questions about this, Skinny. First of all, those are the only 3 players inside his top 100 from the Bengals that made the list. Are there any players you were surprised that were left off of the top 100 list?
Well, the fact he's been a Pro Bowler, he wasn't this past year. I mean, and he wasn't great. He wasn't what you were hoping he would be, but at the same time, he was pretty steady for the most part. Orlando Brown, perhaps, is a little surprising, isn't it?
It's a good point. Yeah,
I mean,
again, it's always easy to say like this guy is definitely a top 100 player until you actually like sit down and do the rankings yourself and realize like how many good players there are.
And that's right.
And that's one of those guys where it's like you'd have to actually like probably play out like how many linemen are better than him and then all the other positions as well.
And that's probably fair.
He's a guy that you would think would be in the conversation for sure. So if you're just glancing at the list, that's one. Are you surprised Trey Hendrickson is as high as 33?
Yeah, a little bit. And, you know, the sack is a number we all love, and he does pressure the quarterback. You know, there's times he's out of position in the run game. I wish it was better. To me, he's a very good player. I just think the sack thing just swallows us all whole at the end of the day, where we look at that number and go, wow, what a great season. It was good. I think he's good. I think he's a very good player. And I think he certainly deserves to be in the top 100. I don't know where I'd put him. I'd have to look at the whole list, but 33 feels extraordinarily high. I would say this. Do you think Trey Hendrickson dominates games the way Chris Jones dominates games?
No, that's exactly where I was going to go next with this. Is I just don't feel like he's a dominant player. And to me, I mean, anyone in the top 35, when you're looking through them, it feels like pretty dominant players for the most part. I was surprised that it was that high. And then to your point about it, the sack number holding such value, he jumped nearly 60 spots from his ranking in last year's Pete Prisco top 100. So that tells you that, you know, the sack number goes up, all of a sudden they completely feel differently about the type of player he is.
Yeah. I mean, and he gets pressures too. It's not just the sacks. There's also pressures that go along with it, quarterback hits that go along with it, all those things. And he's high in those metrics too. But again, I never cover a game going, boy, Trey Hendrickson just wrecked that game. He wrecks moments on occasion. But I never look at him. I mean, I've watched Chris Jones beat the Bengals almost by himself a couple years ago in the AFC Championship game. He really did.
Yes. I mean, I like Trey Hendrickson. He's been one of the best additions the Bengals have made.
Great signing.
In my entire lifetime. But I would also say, like, he is not a guy that would scare me if he was an opponent. Like, you wouldn't sit there all week going, oh my God, they've got to block Trey Hendrickson this week.
Like J.J. Watt, like Myles Garrett.
Exactly. And the Bengals, as Bengals fans, we do that all the time because of their terrible offensive line. We're like, oh God, who do they got on the end? Trey Hendrickson would be one of the weeks where I'm going, all right, they don't have a monster there. You know, I mean, that's just right. So I guess my thought is when I saw this ranking, the top third of the top 100 was surprising to me. I was expecting him to be like somewhere around 66th, maybe the second to third of the top 100.
The one thing I will say about Trey in a positive manner is there is a consistency level with him, right? It's not like 5 sacks one game, then 6 games without a sack, and 4 sacks in another game, and the sack total becomes big. Trey's a pretty consistent player. I think that is a positive, and maybe sometimes we take that for granted when we're looking at he doesn't wreck games. I'm just going off eyeball test that he doesn't wreck games because I don't think he does. I think he affects games. I just don't think he wrecks them.
Yeah, good point. Also, one last question on this. Would you rank Jamar Chase higher than Joe Burrow if you were doing an overall players ranking for the Bengals?
I think I would. And it's because Jamar's durability more than Joe's durability. You probably can't rank one without the other, right? And maybe they should be 13A and 13B be ranked together. They're really close, obviously, at 13 and 15. But I mean, look, Jamar Chase is one of the 2 or 3 best wide receivers in football. I can make an argument because of Joe Burrow's health that he's 5 to 7 in that range. And again, so that's where we're very much splitting hairs here. They're 2 spots apart from each other. And if you flip-flop them, I wouldn't argue that that's a bad flip-flop either. So
right. Yeah, that's the funny thing about this is it's like almost that Pete Prisco acknowledged exactly what you're saying of like, you really can't rank these guys far apart. They're basically 1A and 1B for the Bengals, however you want to sort that out. So he put them at 13th and 15th. I'm surprised it wasn't just 13th and 14th or 15th and 16th because of that. It's weird though, because I can see how Jamar Chase ranks higher from an overall NFL perspective. Like when you're just looking at the players, you're like, Jamar might be better as a receiver than Joe Burrow is as a quarterback in those rankings.
And it's very slight, right?
Very
but
slight.
It is.
But at the same time, if you asked me for the Bengals, who's more important? Like, there's no doubt you need Joe Burrow more than you need Jamar Chase. You can get rid of Jamar Chase, and you've still got a chance to compete in the AFC North and in the NFL. If you get rid of Joe Burrow, the Bengals are going back to the dark ages immediately. Like, I know they kept it going for a couple games last year while he was out. I promise you that's not the case long term.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for 17 games if Jake Browning has a winning record. I do think we saw in the short term, Jake Browning is exactly what you want him to be, a very capable backup quarterback.
With Jamar Chase, by the way.
With Jamar Chase.
Yes. Yeah, it's just different. I mean, the quarterback position is so important. It makes it so hard to do a rankings like this.
Yeah, and again, I can see this ranking last year. I'd imagine Joe Burrow was probably easily inside the top 10 coming off of a Super Bowl and an AFC championship. But when you've had 2 injury-plagued years out of 4, you get dinged for that, right or wrong.
Yeah, and he should be. Yeah, I agree with that. We have another question here, Skinny, that was Ask Skinny Anything question, but we're in the Bengals, and this is a Bengals topic, and it kind of goes right along with our theme. In fact, it is the most of our theme, I would say. Who would you put on the Bengals Mount Rushmore?
Anthony Munoz, Ken Anderson, Paul Brown, and I got to put him there right now. I'll go Chad Johnson.
Wow.
I could have missed somebody. And this is coming from the guy who beats the drum of Lamar Parrish. But
they're just not recognized. That's not recognized.
I think there's 3. The 3 easy ones are Ken Anderson, Munoz, and Paul Brown. And we can argue about the 4th.
Munoz and Paul Brown are no doubters, automatics. Ken Anderson, I think, is a pretty easy 3rd.
Yeah,
once you get to the 4th, I mean, what are the other names that we're even talking about? I know you disagree, but I think Boomer, from a name recognition standpoint, is probably in the conversation.
Boomer's the 5th best quarterback in Bengals history.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think from name recognition standpoint, he's one of the first guys that would come up if you were asking a random fan about Bengals players they could name off the top of their head. Boomer Esiason would be in that group.
I mean, Willie Anderson played tackle. He wouldn't be there, even though he's probably the next Hall of Famer that they're going to have. And rightfully so. I think Willie deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He's come damn close, and it's probably his time. Well, the 4th one you could make. Boy, that's a good one. I mean, Chad holds all the receiving records. I know that question. I know that question. Somebody wants to put Joe Burrow up there already, correct?
No, I don't think. I think this came from. I think another site may have been doing this on their thing. Someone asked us this, but I think they got it from someone else's argument this week. And I'll be honest, I didn't see the argument, so I don't know who they had in the conversation. But Burrow, there's no way yet. I mean, he's definitely on the path to that, but there's no way we're in that conversation just yet. But it's not easy to figure. I like Chad Johnson personally.
You know, I think Chad was a clown show, right? You know where my stance is at personally. But
I was shocked to hear you say that.
But because I can't knock what the guy did performance wise. And again, when you're the record holder in literally, I think every major receiving statistical category, which Jamar Chase will probably blow right by at some point if he stays a Bengal, stays healthy. I think both those things are true. You can't ignore that. I can't ignore what he did on the field. I can try to ignore the foolishness and pan that, but I can't pan the performance.
And part of the foolishness, though, adds to why he's probably in this conversation, because he's so popular and so well known.
If you put this up for a vote, I bet you he would win that vote of, okay, we've got the 3, who's the 4th? And if you said vote right in your candidate or give him 10 candidates, whoever you want to do, he'd win the vote, in my opinion.
I think you're right. And I'll be honest, I'm having a hard time coming up with a 4th name to even compete with him right now. I thought it would be easier to come up with a handful of them, but it's really not. I mean,
if he had stayed playing football instead of going to play the piano, Mike Reed would be on there. Go look him up.
Fair enough. I mean, Corey Dillon doesn't even really approach that, I don't think.
No, he does. I mean, I could make a minor case because he got him to the Super Bowl and really he wasn't the first coach to get into relevance. Paul Brown was, because Paul Brown took him to 3 playoffs in a short period of time. But Forrest Gregg, I mean, he's got the Mount Rushmore face, does he not?
Yeah, he would look great on it. Yeah,
he really would.
The best part of the Mount Rushmore for the Bengals, though, is Paul Brown's hat.
Oh, for sure. Could
you imagine the extra time they'd have to do on that thing?
No question. That'd be great.
All right. Skinny
And
one.
the other part I'd like to see is, even though it's a face, you have to have somehow have Anthony's the crooked finger. You've seen the crooked finger, right?
Oh,
On
yeah.
Anthony. Oh yeah, you got to have that in there somewhere, right?
Well, I went to Holy Cross High School, and Bruce Kazerski was my
Oh yeah,
football
yep.
coach and
Yep.
math teacher there. And it was always a big topic of conversation when you'd see him on the board writing. And, like one pinky was sticking out this way, and then the other ring finger could go all types of ways. I mean, those offensive lineman fingers are always just mangled.
Mangled. They are mangled.